The invitation arrived in a cream envelope thick enough to feel expensive. Ifeoma Nwosu knew who had sent it before she turned it over. Nobody else used wax seals anymore except people who wanted paper to feel like power. She stood in the narrow kitchen of her Durham apartment with rain tapping softly against the window, one hand still dusted with flour from the plantain buns she had been making for a neighbor's child. The apartment was small but alive. Dried flowers hung upside down near the window. Fabric samples covered one wall in careful rows. Old restoration books were stacked beneath a lamp with a cracked shade. Her mother's sewing machine sat by the corner, black iron and gold lettering, polished every Sunday like an altar. Aoife turned the envelope over. The seal showed the virile crest, a stag beneath a crown. She almost laughed. The virile family had spent 15 years pretending she and her mother were a stain that could be scrubbed out of the family tree. Now, apparently, the stain was being invited to dinner. She broke the seal. The card inside was written in raised gold lettering. The virile family reunion. Halcyon Ridge Estate. Cashiers, North Carolina. Saturday, 4:00 in the afternoon. Below that, in elegant script. Family is legacy. Family is memory. Family is home. Aoife read the line twice. Then she placed the card on the counter and whispered, "Shameless." Her phone buzzed before she could throw the invitation into the drawer where she kept unpaid bills, old receipts, and things she did not yet have the courage to burn. A voicemail from Aunt Callista. Aoife stared at the name on the screen. She had not heard Callista Viral's voice in almost 2 years. Not since the woman had called after Aoife's mother died and said, with the tenderness of a knife wrapped in silk, that Seraphine had been difficult but spirited. Aoife played the voicemail. "Ifeoma, darling. I do hope the invitation reached you. We were all saying how healing it might be for you to come home for the reunion. Everyone should remember where they come from, even when life takes them elsewhere." There was a pause. Aoife could almost see Callista smiling. "Do come. Your grandmother would like to see you. And honestly, dear, it would be good for the younger cousins to understand the importance of resilience. You've had such a humble little journey." The message ended. Aoife stood still for a moment. Then she deleted it. Not because the words did not hurt, because she refused to keep evidence of a woman who had mastered the art of making insults sound like concern. Humble little journey. That was what Callista called eviction notices, funeral costs, borrowed dresses, scholarship essays written at midnight, and a mother dying with unpaid medical bills stacked beside her bed. Aoife went back to kneading dough, but her hands had lost their rhythm. She did not want to go to Halcyon Ridge. The estate sat in the Blue Ridge Mountains like something carved from inherited arrogance. Stone walls, long lawns, white columns, old portraits. The kind of place where servants knew more family secrets than priests. Her mother, Seraphine Nwosu, had grown up there as the inconvenient daughter of Eulalie Viral's youngest son. Too artistic for their plans. Too warm for their rules. Too willing to fall in love with a Nigerian architecture student who had nothing but talent, charm, and a laugh that could fill a room. The family had called it rebellion. Seraphine had called it love. They cut her off before Aoife was born. But before that, before the exile, Seraphine had helped restore the family's historic textile collection. Gowns from the 1800s, hand-embroidered shawls, wedding veils yellowed by time. Silk waistcoats worn by dead men with oil-painted faces. She had catalogued them, repaired them, documented them, and written restoration notes so detailed that museums later praised the Viral collection as one of the finest privately preserved textile archives in the South. Only nobody praised Seraphine. Her name vanished from the records after she married Aoife's father. That was the real reason Aoife did not immediately burn the invitation. Somewhere inside Halcyon Ridge, if it had not been thrown away, was her mother's restoration portfolio. Sketches, notes, fabric studies, letters. The last proof that Seraphine had been brilliant before the family reduced her to a cautionary tale. Aoife wiped her hands and looked toward the sewing machine. Her mother's voice seemed to rise from memory. Never let people who erased you become the only ones telling the story. By midnight, Aoife had made her decision. She would go, not to beg, not to be welcomed, not to smile, while cousins measured the price of her shoes. She would go to collect what belonged to her mother. And then she would leave. The next morning, while she was repairing a torn embroidered panel for a small museum client, her phone rang again. Unknown number. She almost ignored it, then answered with the distracted caution of a woman who knew bills could call from any direction. Hello. A polished female voice spoke. Good morning. Am I speaking with Miss Ifeoma Nwosu? Yes. My name is Sunmi Vale. I am calling on behalf of Mr. Ryu Songhwan. The needle in Ife's hand stopped halfway through the fabric. The room seemed to quiet. She had not heard that name spoken aloud in 4 years. Sunmi continued. Mr. Ryu understands that you will be attending the Viral family reunion at Halcyon Ridge this Saturday. He would like to know whether you would allow him the honor of escorting you. Ife did not answer. Outside, a car hissed through rainwater on the street. Inside, the past opened one eye. For years earlier, Ifeoma had met Ryu Songhwan behind a velvet curtain at a charity auction in Atlanta, while his younger sister was shaking so badly she could not hold a glass of water. The auction was the kind of event where wealthy people paid too much for old things and called it generosity. Crystal chandeliers, champagne towers, cameras, donors in gowns and tuxedos. A string quartet playing softly beneath the sound of social ambition. Ife had not been a guest. She had been hired by the restoration team to prepare antique embroidered pieces for display. That meant she entered through service doors, wore black flats instead of heels, and learned quickly which women smiled at her only when they assumed she was staff. She was backstage adjusting a 19th-century silk shawl when she heard sharp breathing behind a row of garment racks. At first, she thought someone was crying. Then she found the young woman. Ryu Hanol was crouched near the wall in a silver dress, one hand pressed against her chest, the other gripping the hem of a velvet curtain. Her face was pale. Her eyeliner had smudged. Her breaths came too fast. Beyond the curtain, voices floated in. That's Ryu's sister, isn't it? The Korean crime family? I heard their money moves through art logistics now. Careful. People like that buy museums and bury bodies. Laughter followed. Soft. Polite. Cruel. Ife looked down at Hanol and understood at once. Panic did not always arrive screaming. Sometimes it folded a person silently into the smallest possible shape. She knelt. Hey, Ife said gently. Look at me.
Not them. Me.
Hanol's eyes lifted, terrified and embarrassed. I can't breathe. You can. Your body just forgot the rhythm for a second. We'll remind it. Ife took the silk shawl from the display table, ignoring every rule about touching auction pieces without gloves, and draped it around Hanol's shoulders so the young woman felt less exposed. Then she found a bottle of water, sat beside her on the floor, and began breathing slowly. In for 4. Hold for 2. Out for 6. Don't rush. Let them wait for your comeback. Hanol gave a broken little laugh. 15 minutes later, when Ryu Songhwan found them, he did not see scandal. He saw his sister wrapped in an antique shawl, sitting on the floor beside a black woman in plain work clothes who was guarding her from a room full of expensive predators. Songhwan entered silently. Ife looked up. Most men announced power by making noise. This one did not need to. He was tall, immaculate, and calm in a way that made the air around him behave. His black suit looked custom-made, but his eyes were not soft luxury eyes. They were the eyes of someone who counted exits before trusting walls. Hanol, he said. His sister reached for him. He crouched immediately, all danger gone from his face for her.
I'm okay, Hanol whispered.
She helped me. Songhwan looked at Ife. She stood, smoothing her plain black dress. She was overwhelmed. The photographers kept following her. Everyone saw her, he said. Only you moved. Ife shrugged. Then everyone else should be embarrassed. For the first time, something like amusement touched his mouth. Later, he found her near the service corridor as she was packing damaged tissue paper into a crate. You refused the auction director's complaint, he said. Ife did not look up. The shawl needed airing anyway. You broke preservation protocol. I protected a person. Fabric can forgive me. He studied her. Then he took out a card. Heavy. Black. Minimal lettering. If you need anything, call. Aoife accepted the card only because refusing it would have been rude after his sister thanked her twice. I don't need payment. It is not payment. It is a favor. Then use it on someone who needs saving, she said. I only did what anyone decent should have done. Song Hwan's face changed slightly. At the time, Aoife did not understand why. Years later, she would. Men like him lived in rooms where decency always came with invoices. Now, for years after that auction, Aoife stood in her apartment holding the phone while Sunmi Vale waited patiently on the line. Miss Nwosoo. I'm here, Aoife said. Would you like me to arrange a time for Mr. Ryu to speak with you directly? No, Aoife said, then stopped. I mean yes. Actually, no. I don't understand why he's offering. A brief pause. Then Sunmi's voice softened by half a degree. He believes you may be walking into a room designed to misunderstand you. Aoife closed her eyes. That was too accurate. That evening, Song Hwan called himself. His voice was exactly as she remembered.
Calm. Low. Controlled.
Miss Nwosoo. Mr. Ryu. I heard about the reunion.
How?
A family like the Virals does not sharpen knives quietly. Aoife almost smiled despite herself. I am not helpless. I know. Then why offer? Because cruel people behave differently when witnesses have power. She walked to the window. Durham's evening sky was soft violet, the glass reflecting her face back at her. I don't want to be rescued. I am not offering rescue. What are you offering? Presents. The words settled between them. He continued. 4 years ago, you stood beside my sister when doing so brought you nothing. I have not forgotten. I didn't do it for debt. That is why the debt remains honorable. Aoife looked at her mother's sewing machine. They invited me to mock me. Yes. You sound very sure. I know families who disguise cruelty as tradition. That she believed. If I allow this, she said, you do not speak for me unless I ask. A pause. Then his voice warmed slightly. Then I will stand beside you and enjoy watching them discover your voice. The next morning, a garment bag arrived. Inside was a champagne couture gown, elegant, luminous, and breathtakingly simple. Not loud, not desperate. A dress that did not beg to be noticed because it already knew it would be. There was also a handwritten note. Do not dress to impress them. Dress so the girl they tried to shame can finally see herself clearly. Aoife read the note twice. Then she sat beside her mother's sewing machine and cried quietly, not because she was weak, but because dignity was heavy when you had carried it alone for too long. Halcyon Ridge had never looked more beautiful. That was the lie of it. The Viral estate rose above the mountain road in pale stone and old pride, its lawns rolling toward blue ridges layered with afternoon haze. White tents had been raised across the grass. Florists moved between banquet tables overflowing with peonies, roses, and trailing greenery. A string quartet tuned near the fountain. Luxury vehicles lined the circular drive like trophies. Everything shone. Everything smiled. Everything cost money the Viral family no longer had. Aunt Callista Viral stood beneath the main tent in a pale rose dress, supervising the placement of name cards as if seating arrangements were military strategy. No, she told a young server. Miss Nwosoo is not at the central family table. Put her near the outer table, the one by the service path. The server hesitated, but the card says family guest. Callista smiled. Exactly. Her son, Thane, lounged nearby with a glass of champagne though the reunion had not officially begun. He wore a linen suit, his hair styled carelessly in the expensive way that required effort. Beside him, his fiancée, Bellamy Quince, practiced angles for her phone camera, searching for the version of herself most likely to look effortless online. Thane watched the server carry Aoife's place card away. Mother, don't be too cruel. Callista looked pleased. I am never cruel. I am instructive. She may actually cry. She will not cry. Girls like Ifeoma learn early that tears make rich people uncomfortable. Bellamy lowered her phone. Which one is Ifeoma again? Thane smirked. The poor cousin. Well, technically cousin adjacent. Her mother ran off with some idealist and got herself cut out of the family. She's coming here? Bellamy asked, delighted in the way people became when gossip arrived with seating. Callista adjusted a floral arrangement. I thought it would be charitable. Thane laughed. You thought it would be entertaining. Callista did not deny it. Across the lawn, guests began arriving in summer suits, silk dresses, pearls, and practiced laughter. Cousins kissed cheeks. Uncles compared cars. Women complimented each other's outfits with tones sharp enough to peel paint. On the veranda above them, Eulalie Viral watched from a cushioned chair. She was 82, silver-haired, thin as a candle, and still capable of making grown relatives stand straighter with one look. Officially, Halcyon Ridge belonged to her. In practice, Callista controlled the house, the invitations, the staff, and the stories told inside its walls. Eulalie had not wanted to invite Iphioma, only to wound her. But she had also not stopped Callista. That was the shape of her regret. Not active cruelty, but cowardice wearing family pearls. A servant placed tea beside her. Has Miss Nwosu arrived? Eulalie asked. Not yet, ma'am. Eulalie nodded, though her fingers tightened on the armrest. Inside the house, in a locked archive room nobody had properly entered in years, Seraphine Nwosu's restoration portfolio sat in a cedar drawer beneath a stack of mislabeled fabric studies. Eulalie knew it was there. She had known for years. She had told herself there would be time to return it. Time had become a habit of delay. Down on the lawn, Callista prepared her toast. She had written it herself that morning, each line polished until cruelty gleamed softly. Family legacy, resilience, the importance of wise choices. A gentle mention of Seraphine's unfortunate romantic decisions. A graceful acknowledgement of Iphioma's humble circumstances. Nothing overt, nothing vulgar. Callista never used a hammer when a pin could draw blood. Near the bar, Thane leaned toward two cousins and murmured, $10 says she arrives in something polyester. One cousin snorted. Be kind. Polyester has aspirations too. They laughed. A server passing behind them lowered her eyes. Then a different servant came quickly from the direction of the front drive, nearly breathless. Mrs. Viral? Callista turned, annoyed. What is it? There's a convoy at the gate. Callista's expression changed instantly. The investor. For 6 months, the Viral family had been hunting salvation while pretending they were choosing expansion. Thane's failed development deals had drained private accounts. A luxury resort scheme in Asheville had collapsed. 2 loans were coming due. The estate itself had been quietly used as collateral. Halcyon Ridge looked wealthy because Callista understood staging. But behind the flowers and champagne, the family was rotting financially from the beams inward. The name they had chased for rescue was Ryu Songhwan.
Korean investor.
Luxury property king. Cultural foundation owner. Dangerous rumor. Serious money. Callista smoothed her dress. Tell the quartet to begin the Vivaldi.
Tana, stand properly.
Bellamy, stop filming your mouth. Bellamy blinked. I wasn't.
Now.
Callista moved toward the front lawn with her richest smile already blooming. At the end of the gravel drive, black cars rolled through the gates. Not 1.
5.
The conversation across the lawn began to soften. Then stop. Bodyguards stepped out first.
Tall. Silent. Dark suits.
Eyes moving without seeming to. Callista's smile widened, though unease flickered beneath it. Then the lead car door opened. Ryu Songhwan stepped out. Even from a distance, the lawn understood him. He was not loud. He was not flashy. He did not look around to see who was watching. He simply stood, perfectly tailored in black, with the calm of a man who did not enter rooms hoping to be welcomed. Rooms adjusted to him. Callista began walking forward. Mr. Ryu. But Songhwan did not look at her. He walked around the car himself and opened the rear door. The entire lawn watched. A hand emerged first. Brown skin. Diamond bracelet. Champagne silk. Then Iphioma Nwosu stepped into the golden afternoon. For a moment, Halcyon Ridge forgot how to breathe. Her curls fell over one shoulder in dark, luxurious waves. The champagne gown caught the light like warm water. Diamonds rested at her throat, elegant, but not excessive. Her face was serene, not smug, not nervous, not grateful. She did not look like a poor relation invited to be pitted. She looked like the woman the whole event had accidentally been waiting for. Songhwan offered his arm. Aoife took it. Linked together, they walked toward the family. A cousin dropped her fork. Bellamy stopped filming. Thane's mouth opened, then closed. And Aunt Callista Viral, for the first time anyone could remember, dropped her wine glass before taking a sip. Red spilled across the grass like a warning. Aoife stopped before her aunt and smiled softly. I hope we are not late. For the first time in her life, Ifeoma Nwosu saw the Viral family with their mouths open and nothing clever coming out. It was almost worth the years of insults. The reunion lawn had gone so quiet that the fountain sounded loud. The string quartet faltered halfway through a bright Vivaldi passage. Someone's champagne glass hovered in midair. A cousin near the dessert table leaned too far back in shock and nearly sat in the floral arrangement. Aoife stood beside Ryu Songhwan beneath the golden mountain light, her arm linked through his, feeling the entire weight of Halcyon Ridge staring at her. Not at her shoes. Not at the price of her dress. Not at the old story they had assigned to her before she was born. At her. Aunt Callista recovered first, because women like Callista treated shock as a temporary failure of posture. She stepped over the broken wine glass in the grass and smiled with all her teeth. Ifeoma, darling. The word darling came out like something dipped in honey and poison. Callista opened her arms as if she had been waiting years to embrace her forgotten niece. Aoife did not move into them. Callista's arms slowly lowered. What a transformation. Aoife smiled softly. Thank you, Aunt Callista. You always did enjoy measuring people by fabric. A few relatives looked down quickly. Songhwan said nothing. That made him worse. If he had threatened them, they could have called him uncivilized. If he had flaunted money, they could have called him vulgar. Instead, he stood in perfect silence, one hand resting lightly over Aoife's fingers, his eyes calm as they moved across the family, like he was reading a balance sheet full of rot. Callista turned her smile toward him. Mr. Ryu, we are honored. We had no idea you were acquainted with our little Aoife. Songhwan looked at her for one measured second. Then your family has made a habit of not knowing the valuable things in front of you. The insult was so beautifully dressed that half the lawn did not realize it had been cut until it started bleeding. Thane Viral cleared his throat and came forward, suddenly eager to reposition himself near importance. He had been handsome as a boy, and he had grown into a man who trusted that handsomeness more than character. His linen suit looked expensive. His smile looked rented. Aoife, he said. Been a long time. She looked at him. Not long enough for some people to become interesting. His smile twitched. Bellamy Quince, his fiancée, stared at Aoife's gown with the wounded expression of a woman realizing the background character had stolen the scene. Callista gestured toward the tables. We arranged a place for you, of course. It's a large event, so seating has been rather complicated. I'm sure, Aoife said. They walked through the lawn. Whispers followed them like insects. Is that really Ifeoma? How does she know him? That's Ryu Songhwan. I thought she was broke. Where did she get that dress? Aoife heard all of it. She had spent childhood learning to hear insults spoken behind hands. She had learned which laughter belonged to amusement and which belonged to cruelty. She had learned the exact tone wealthy relatives used when they said brave and meant unfortunate. Songhwan leaned slightly toward her. Do you want them silenced?
No, she said.
I want them audible. His mouth curved faintly. At the central family table, the place cards were written in gold ink. Callista Viral, Eulalie Viral, Thane Viral, Bellamy Quince. Honored guests. Aoife's name was not there. A server, pale with discomfort, led them toward the outer edge of the tent, close to the service path where staff moved trays from the catering station. There, on a smaller table beside distant cousins and two elderly neighbors who looked equally confused, sat a place card. Ifeoma Nwosu. No +1. No family title. Just the name, exiled in calligraphy. Aoife picked it up and studied it. The server whispered, I'm so sorry, ma'am. Aoife gave her a gentle smile. You didn't write it. Songhwan's eyes moved from the place card to Callista, who was watching from the center table with a lifted chin. Would you like me to handle this? He asked quietly. Aoife placed the card back down exactly where she found it.
No, she said.
I came here to remember who they are. Then she turned and walked toward the central table. The cousins parted without being asked. Callista's smile tightened as Aoife approached. Is something wrong, darling? Not at all, Aoife said. I only wanted to thank you for the seating. Callista blinked. How gracious. It told me everything before dessert. Eulalie Viral, sitting beneath the shade of the veranda side of the tent, looked up sharply. For the first time that afternoon, Aoife saw something in the old woman's face that was not pride. Shame, maybe. Too late to be useful, but not too late to be noticed. Songwon pulled out a chair at the central table. Not for himself.
For Aoife.
Every eye turned toward Callista. The power of the moment was simple. Callista could object and reveal her cruelty, or accept and lose control. Aoife waited. Callista's smile trembled by a fraction. Of course, she said. Sit wherever you are comfortable. Aoife sat. Song-hwan took the chair beside her without asking permission from anyone. And around the Viral reunion, the family finally understood that the poor girl had not come to be placed. She had come to take up space. Callista waited until the champagne had been poured. That was her mistake. She believed cruelty worked best when softened by bubbles, sunlight, and an audience trained to laugh at the correct moments. She rose from her chair with a crystal flute in hand, the mountains glowing behind her, her rose-colored dress making her look almost gentle from far away. Almost. My dear family, she began. The tent settled into attention. Aoife folded her hands in her lap. Song-hwan leaned back slightly, eyes on Callista, expression unreadable. How beautiful it is, Callista continued, to gather at Halcyon Ridge once again. This estate has held generations of Viral stories, triumphs, weddings,
Births.
difficult lessons. Every family has branches that grow straight toward the light, and others that wander. A few cousins smiled. Aoife did not move. Callista's gaze drifted toward her. Today, I am especially touched that Iphioma has joined us. Her mother, dear Seraphine, was one of our more passionate souls. She chose a life far from the structure and responsibility this family offered. Love, as we know, can make young women confuse feeling for wisdom. A quiet laugh moved along one side of the table. Thane looked down into his drink, smiling. Aoife felt the old heat rise in her chest. Not embarrassment. Not anymore. Recognition. This was not a toast. It was an execution with floral centerpieces. Callista lifted her glass higher. But poverty, hardship, and humble circumstances can also teach resilience. And perhaps that is why dear Iphioma returns to us today with such grace. She reminds us that even those who begin with very little can still stand near legacy and learn from it. The polite laughter came again, this time thinner, because Song-hwan had not laughed. He did not even blink. Callista noticed and hurried to finish. To family, to memory, to knowing where we come from. Glasses lifted. Aoife stood. Her chair made the smallest sound against the grass floor, but it moved through the tent like thunder. She picked up her champagne. To family, she said. Her voice was not loud. It carried anyway. To memory, and to knowing exactly where stories were edited. Callista's smile froze. Aoife turned slightly, not just to Callista, but to everyone. Thank you, Aunt Callista, for mentioning my mother. Seraphine Nwosu was passionate. That much is true. She was also disciplined, brilliant, and more responsible with this family's history than most of the people born to inherit it.
The tent changed.
A cousin stopped chewing. Eulalie's hand tightened around her cane. Aoife continued. When my mother was still welcome at Halcyon Ridge, she catalogued and restored half of the Viral textile collection. The 19th century mourning veils, the Maribel wedding gown, the French embroidered shawls, the blue silk waistcoat that traveled to the Charleston exhibit and came back with a museum commendation. Callista's face paled beneath her makeup. My mother wrote the restoration notes. My mother stabilized the fabric. My mother identified the dye sources. My mother preserved the pieces that made this family look cultured in rooms where money alone would have looked common. Thane muttered, This is ridiculous. Aoife turned to him. Careful, Thane. Some of us learned to keep receipts because we couldn't afford lawyers. Song Hwan lifted one hand. A bodyguard standing near the tent entrance stepped forward and placed a slim folder on the table beside Aoife. She did not touch it immediately. The silence became absolute. Aoife opened the folder. Inside were copies of museum records, archive photographs, and old restoration notes bearing Seraphine's handwriting. Beside them were published exhibit materials crediting the Viral family archive, with no mention of Seraphine Nwosu. Callista's voice sharpened. Where did you get those? Aoife looked at her. From institutions that answer emails when the request comes with evidence and manners. Song Hwan's eyes flickered with approval. Aoife lifted one page. This is my mother's handwriting. This is her stitching diagram. This is her fabric analysis. This is the public record where her name disappeared. The laughter was gone now. In its place came whispers. Not the cruel kind. The dangerous kind. The kind that meant people were recalculating. Callista placed her glass down. Ifioma, this is not the appropriate setting for old grievances. You invited me here to make my mother an old grievance. That is not what You called her a woman who confused feeling for wisdom. Aoife's voice remained steady. But she loved a man who respected her. This family punished her for that. Then kept her work. Eulalie closed her eyes. For the first time, Aoife aimed the words at her. I did not come here to be accepted. I came for my mother's restoration portfolio. Her sketches. Her notes. Her letters. They belonged to her daughter. Callista stood straighter. Anything created under this roof belongs to the Viral estate. That was the moment Song Hwan finally spoke.
No.
One word. The entire tent turned. Callista tried to smile. Mr. Ryu, with respect, this is a family matter. Then I am impressed by how publicly you chose to mishandle it. Her mouth tightened. Song Hwan reached into the folder and removed a copy of a contract so old its skin showed folded corners. Seraphine Nwosu worked on the collection as an independent restorer before she was disowned. There is no signed transfer of intellectual or artistic documentation. Your estate retained physical materials, not authorship. Callista looked at him as if he had slapped her without moving. Thane leaned toward his mother. Is that true? Callista ignored him. Aoife's voice softened, which somehow made it cut deeper. You invited me to remind me I came from nothing. But I came to remind you what you stole from the woman who made your name look cultured. No one laughed this time. At the far end of the table, Eulalie Viral opened her eyes and looked, finally, like a woman who understood that silence had become testimony against her. The reunion did not recover after the toast. It rearranged itself around fear. People still smiled, but the smiles had become careful. Cousins who had whispered about Aoife's dress now avoided her eyes. Bellamy pretended to check her phone while obviously recording pieces of the conversation under the table. Thane drank too quickly. Callista gave instructions to servers with the clipped panic of a woman trying to control weather by rearranging napkins. The string quartet began playing again. Nobody listened. Near the hydrangea hedge, Callista pulled Thane aside so hard champagne spilled over his fingers. How exposed are we? She demanded. He stared at her. How would I know? You were managing the museum wing proposal. I was managing the investor side. You said the archive records were clean. I said they were quiet. That is not the same thing. Callista's eyes flashed. Do not become intelligent at an inconvenient time. Thane glanced toward the central table, where Aoife sat calmly beside Ryu Song-hwan. Mother, he said slowly. Why is he here with her? Callista looked at him as if he had asked the only question that mattered. The Viral family had spent 6 months chasing a rescue while calling it a partnership. Thane's Asheville development collapse had drained accounts nobody outside the family knew existed. 2 private loans were due. The estate's maintenance costs were devouring them. Halcyon Ridge was not a mansion anymore. It was collateral with flowers. The only serious investor still interested in their historic textile wing was connected to an international cultural foundation tied to luxury property, rare art logistics, and private security. Ryu Song-hwan. The man sitting beside Ifioma Nwosu. The poor girl. The entertainment.
The mistake.
Callista inhaled sharply. Fix your face, she told Thane. Then she walked towards Song-hwan with the elegant desperation of a woman who had never begged in public, but was willing to do it privately. Mr. Ryu, she said, stopping beside his chair. May I steal you for a moment? There are matters regarding the estate proposal I would love to clarify. Song-hwan looked at Ife, not Callista. Ife gave a small shrug. Enjoy. He stood. Callista led him toward the rose garden, far enough from the main tables to pretend privacy existed. I must apologize, she began, her voice silk again. Family gatherings can stir old sensitivities. Ifeoma has always been loved, but she is understandably delicate about her circumstances. Song-hwan looked across the lawn at Ife. She sat beneath the tent, sunlight catching her champagne gown, posture straight, hands resting near the folder of her mother's proof. She does not look delicate. Callista laughed lightly. You know what I mean.
Ido.
That answer unsettled her. She pressed on. The Viral family has always taken pride in helping less fortunate branches find their footing. But gratitude is sometimes difficult for young people who have experienced hardship. Song-hwan turned toward her fully. You confuse poverty with weakness, because wealth has protected you from mirrors. Callista's face stiffened. Excuse me? You heard me. A peacock cried somewhere near the fountain, absurdly dramatic. Callista lowered her voice. Mr. Ryu, surely you will not allow one emotional misunderstanding to affect a serious investment opportunity. I am not judging the misunderstanding. Good. I am judging the tradition. Her smile disappeared. He continued, calm as a blade laid flat on a table. My group considered supporting the Viral textile wing because the archive appeared historically significant. Now I discover the most important restoration labor connected to that archive was erased from public credit, and the daughter of the erased woman was invited here to be humiliated beside the work her mother preserved. Callista swallowed. That is a very harsh interpretation. It is a generous one. For the first time, Callista looked afraid. Not of violence. Of consequences dressed as reputation. If funding is your concern, we can revisit terms. Funding is not my concern. Then what is? Character. She looked almost offended. Business does not run on character. No, Song-hwan said. That is why people like me have to keep rescuing people like you from the cost of not having any. Back near the Rose Walk, Thane found Ife alone for the first time that afternoon. She had stepped away from the tent to breathe. He approached with his hands in his pockets, the old smile already forming, the one that said he expected forgiveness because he had once been charming. Ife. She turned. Thane. Quite the performance. I learned from the family. He laughed softly.
Come on.
We were all kids once. You can't still be upset about ancient history. Ife studied him. The last time she had seen him before today, she was 17 and wearing second-hand shoes polished so hard the fake leather cracked. Thane had told her she looked nice at a summer party. She had believed him for almost 12 minutes until she heard him laughing with his friends near the pool. She thinks I like her.
Poor thing.
Literally. Ife looked at the man now and felt nothing romantic, nothing wistful, not even anger in its old form. Only clarity. You weren't a kid, she said. You were already practicing inheritance. His smile faded. That's unfair.
No.
What was unfair was learning shame from people who had never earned pride. Thane stepped closer. You could help smooth this over. Mother listens to optics. If you make some public statement that this was all emotional, Mr. Ryu might still. There it is. What? The reason you found me. He lowered his voice. Don't pretend you don't understand opportunity. You didn't arrive with him by accident. Ife's eyes sharpened. Be careful. Or what? His tone grew uglier now that charm had failed. He stops finding you fascinating? Men like that don't escort women like you unless there's a reason. The sentence landed. But before Ife could answer, another voice came from behind him. Explain the reason. Thane froze. Song-hwan stood at the end of the rose path, one hand resting casually at his side. He had not raised his voice, but Thane reacted as if someone had touched a gun to his spine. Mr. Ryu, Thane said quickly. You misunderstood. I often do, Songhwan said. When men speak carelessly near women, they assume lack witnesses. Thane's face flushed. Songhwan looked past him to Aoife. Is this man bothering you? Aoife held his gaze. For years, she had imagined being rescued in moments like this. As a girl, she wanted someone to walk in, shame the cruel people, make them apologize, make them see her. Now the powerful man had walked in, and she discovered she did not need him to speak the ending. She smiled calmly.
No, she said.
He is just discovering I remember everything. Songhwan's expression softened by a fraction. Thane looked between them, suddenly aware he had become unnecessary in his own insult. Aoife stepped around him and walked back toward the tent. Songhwan fell into step beside her. After a moment, he said quietly, You handled him well. I've had practice. I dislike that. So, do I. They reached the edge of the lawn together. The entire family watched them return. This time, Aoife did not feel like she was entering a room that wanted to shrink her. She felt like she was walking through a room that had finally realized she had been tall all along. Eulalie Viral asked for Iphioma after the Rose Garden incident. Not Callista. Not Thane. Not a servant carrying an apology on silver. Eulalie herself. The message came through an old housekeeper named Mrs. Pell, who approached Aoife with both hands folded at her waist and the weary politeness of someone who had watched rich people behave badly for too many decades. Madame Viral would like a private word in the textile room, if you are willing. Aoife looked toward the veranda. Eulalie sat beneath the shade with her cane across her knees, silver hair pinned perfectly, face turned toward the mountains as if she had not been watching everything. Aoife felt Songhwan beside her before he spoke. You do not have to go. I know. Do you want me nearby? She looked at him then. Not at the black suit, not at the quiet authority, not at the bodyguards lingering at a respectful distance. At the man who had come without trying to own the moment. Nearby, she said. Not inside. He nodded once. That was one thing she was beginning to trust about him. He understood boundaries the first time they were spoken. The textile room sat in the oldest wing of Halcyon Ridge, far from the music, champagne, and polished cruelty of the lawn. The air changed as Aoife entered.
Cooler. Dustier.
Heavy with cedar, old paper, lavender sachets, and silence. Covered wardrobes lined one wall. Archival drawers filled another. A long table stood beneath a window where afternoon light fell across folded linen. On the far wall hung a portrait of a young woman in a blue silk gown. Aoife recognized the gown. Her mother had drawn it 100 times. Eulalie stood near the table, leaning on her cane. Without the lawn around her, she seemed smaller. Not powerless. Never that. But human in a way old wealth tried to avoid. You look like Seraphine when you are angry, Eulalie said. Aoife did not smile. You do not get to use that like tenderness. The old woman accepted the blow with a faint closing of her eyes.
No, she said.
I suppose I do not. Aoife folded her arms. Why did you ask me here? Eulalie touched the edge of an archival drawer. Because you came for what belongs to your mother. And because your daughter-in-law embarrassed herself outside. Callista has embarrassed herself for years. Today, people simply noticed. Aoife looked around the room. You knew. Eulalie's mouth tightened. I knew Seraphine's work remained here. That is not what I asked. The old woman slowly sat in a chair near the table. Aoife waited. Outside the window, faint laughter drifted from the lawn, strange and distant, like another world trying to continue without permission. Eulalie finally said, I knew we were cruel to her. The answer did not satisfy Aoife. Cruel is what people call harm when they want it to sound accidental. Eulalie looked at her sharply. For 1 second, the old virile pride returned. Then it faded. You are right. That was unexpected enough that Aoife went quiet. Eulalie reached into her jacket pocket and removed a small brass key. Your mother was gifted. More gifted than anyone in this family had the humility to admit. She could touch a ruined piece of silk and tell you not only what it needed, but who had worn it, who had stored it poorly, who had loved it enough to repair it badly before giving up. Her voice softened. She made dead things speak. Aoife's throat tightened, but she refused to let tears come yet. Then why did you cut her off? Because I was proud. Because she married a man I did not choose. Because I believed family legacy was something guarded by obedience, not expanded by love. Eulalie pushed the key across the table. And because Callista told me that if I forgave Seraphine too quickly, the family would lose discipline. I was foolish enough to listen. Aoife stared at the key. My mother died waiting for one of you to say her name without shame. Eulalie's face crumpled for half a breath, then steadied. I know. No, Aoife said. You know now. That is not the same as knowing when it mattered. The old woman nodded. Each word landed and stayed. She took the key back, opened the lowest cedar drawer, and pulled out a flat archival box tied with cotton ribbon. When she placed it on the table, Aoife stopped breathing. On the lid, in her mother's handwriting, was written, Seraphine Nwosu, Restoration Studies, Virile Textile Collection. Not Virile Archive. Not anonymous notes. Her name. Her mother's name. Aoife's hands shook as she untied the ribbon. Inside were sketches, fabric swatches, color studies, handwritten repair notes, tiny thread samples, letters folded between pages, and photographs of Seraphine younger than Aoife was now, smiling beside gowns the family had later displayed, without credit. For a moment, Aoife was no longer standing in the home that rejected her. She was a little girl at her mother's knee, watching beautiful hands move over cloth while Seraphine said, Everything torn is not ruined, baby. Some things are only waiting for patient hands. A letter lay at the bottom, unsent, addressed to Eulalie. Aoife did not ask permission. She opened it. Her mother's voice rose from the page. I do not regret loving him. I regret that my daughter may grow up thinking my family was ashamed of her. If you cannot love me anymore, at least do not teach her that she was born from a mistake. Aoife pressed the letter to her mouth. The tears came quietly. Eulalie did not touch her. That was wise. After a long while, the old woman said, I cannot undo what I allowed.
No, Aoife whispered.
You cannot. But I can stop pretending Callista speaks for this family. Aoife looked up. Eulalie's eyes were wet now, though her posture remained straight. I will say your mother's name before everyone. I will release the archive materials to you. And if you allow it, I will help make sure the world knows who preserved this collection. Aoife wiped her face. You should not do it because you want forgiveness. I know. Do it because my mother earned it. Eulalie bowed her head. She did. Outside the textile room, Songhwan stood alone in the hallway, hands folded in front of him, giving Aoife the privacy she had requested. When she emerged holding the archive box, he looked at her face and did not ask whether she was all right. Instead, he said, Does it feel heavy? Aoife held the box closer. Yes. He stepped aside, making room for her to walk first. Then it must be real. Callista Virile was not finished. Women like Callista did not surrender because truth appeared. They adjusted lighting, changed language, and searched for another audience. By the time dessert was served beneath the main tent, she had recovered enough to smile again. That made Aoife suspicious. Callista stood near the projection screen with Bellamy's phone in hand and a voice bright enough to make Glass nervous. Before we continue, she announced, I prepared a little family memory presentation. A reminder that the Virile story has always included many seasons, many lessons, and many branches. Aoife looked at the screen, then at Callista. The older woman's smile sharpened. Songhwan leaned close. Do you want this stopped? Aoife's fingers tightened around the edge of her chair.
No.
Because she knew what was coming. The first photograph appeared. Aoife at 14, standing near the edge of a long-ago family picnic in a faded yellow dress that had been altered twice. Her shoes were old. Her curls were pulled back unevenly. She stood with both hands clasped in front of her, trying to look invisible. A few cousins laughed before realizing the mood had changed. The second photo appeared. Seraphine carrying a tray at some family event, not because she was staff, but because no one had offered to help her. The image caught her in an awkward moment, tired, hair loose, dress plain beside the polished, virile women. Callista's voice floated over the tent. We all come from different chapters. Some humbler than others. Thane looked away. Eulalie's expression hardened. Aoife stared at the photograph of her mother.
Not with shame.
With grief. Then the screen flickered. Once.
Twice.
The slideshow stopped. Callista turned sharply toward the technician. What is happening? The next image appeared. It was not a poor family photo. It was Seraphine's restoration sketch of the Maribel wedding gown, displayed beside a museum photograph of the same gown credited to the Viral estate. Then another. Seraphine's handwriting beside exhibit text. Then unpaid invoices. Then letters requesting proper attribution. Then a scan note from a Viral administrator rejecting the request because Seraphine had separated herself from the family's standards. The whispers began instantly. Bellamy lowered her phone, then lifted it again, this time recording the screen. Callista's face went white. Turn it off, she snapped. No one moved. Turn it off. Eulalie stood. Slowly. The entire tent looked at her. Sit down, Callista. Callista froze. Mother. I said sit down. It was not loud. It did not need to be. Callista sat. For the first time that day, she looked like the child being corrected. Aoife looked at Songhwan. He gave the smallest nod towards Sunmi Vale, who stood near the projection table with a tablet in her hand and the calm expression of a woman who had replaced files with surgical precision. Aoife almost laughed. Almost. Then she stood and walked to the microphone. The old Aoife would have trembled. This Aoife still trembled.
But she walked anyway.
My aunt wanted to show you where I came from, she said. The tent was silent. So, let us look properly. She turned toward the screen where Seraphine's notes glowed in the afternoon light. This is where I come from. Not poverty as entertainment. Not old shoes. Not dresses altered to survive another year. I come from a woman who preserved beauty for people who repaid her by erasing her name. Callista's face twisted, but Eulalie's gaze kept her seated. Aoife continued. My mother, Seraphine Wosu, worked in this estate's textile rooms before I was born. Her skill helped build the cultural reputation this family has enjoyed for decades. Today, her work will no longer be hidden inside drawers while others receive applause. Guests turned toward one another. Some looked embarrassed. Others looked fascinated. A few looked excited by scandal, which irritated Aoife, but she kept speaking. With Madame Eulalie Viral's release of the original archive materials, and with support from the Ryu Cultural Foundation, I am announcing the Seraphine Nwosu Restoration Grant. Callista's head snapped up. Thane muttered, What? Aoife's voice steadied. The grant will support young textile restorers, especially those from poor, immigrant, and overlooked backgrounds, whose labor too often disappears beneath institutions with better names and louder patrons. Songhwan watched her with something close to pride, though he kept his face composed. Aoife looked across the tables. I did not come here to be accepted by this family. I came to collect what my mother left behind and build something cleaner with it. The applause began near the back. A young cousin first, then a server, then Bellamy, perhaps because she understood optics better than loyalty. Then others. Not everyone clapped. That was fine. Aoife had not come for everyone. Callista remained seated, red-faced and silent, surrounded by flowers she had ordered for a humiliation that had become a coronation. After the slideshow, the reunion stopped pretending to be normal. Relatives approached Aoife in small waves. Some apologized sincerely, voices low, eyes wet. Some apologized because Songhwan stood nearby. Those were easier to identify. A cousin Aoife barely remembered hugged her too tightly and said, We always knew you were special. Aoife gently stepped back. No, you didn't. The cousin blinked, wounded by accuracy. Thane tried to apologize near the fountain, but his apology began with, I'm sorry if you felt. So, Aoife walked away before he completed the sentence. By sunset, she escaped to the veranda overlooking the mountains. The estate lawn below was scattered with half-empty glasses, wilted flowers, and relatives trying to reorganize their loyalties before dinner. The sky had turned peach and lavender. The Blue Ridge rose beyond the trees, indifferent to the collapse of one family's mythology. Aoife stood with her mother's archive box on the small table beside her. She heard Songhwan approach, but did not turn. You handled the room better than most people handle war, he said. She exhaled. I did not feel powerful.
No.
I felt 14 again. He stopped beside her, leaving space between them. She looked down at her hands. I saw that photo, and for 1 second I was back there. Cheap dress. Bad shoes. Everyone looking past me, or through me, or at me like I was something that had wandered indoors. Song Hwan's voice softened. Courage is not arriving without fear. It is arriving with fear and refusing to bow to it. She glanced at him. You speak like a man who has practiced sounding calm while surrounded by enemies. I have had opportunities. That made her smile faintly. For a while, they watched the mountains. Then Ife asked, Why did you really come? He did not pretend not to understand. Because I knew what they intended. That is not the whole answer.
No.
She waited. Song Hwan looked toward the lawn, where his bodyguard stood at a distance. I have admired you for 4 years. Ife turned fully now. His expression remained controlled, but there was honesty in it. I stayed away because my world is not light. People near me become visible to enemies they did not choose. I told myself distance was respect. And today I realized distance can become another form of cowardice. The words stayed between them. Ife wanted to dismiss them, to make a joke, to protect herself with cleverness. But he had not played games with her. So she did not play games with him. I do not want to be someone's rescue story, she said. I know. If you stand beside me, do it because you respect where I am going, not because you enjoy saving me from where I've been. Song Hwan looked at her then. Not at the gown, not at the diamonds, not at the woman the virile family suddenly feared offending. At Ife. I would not dare reduce you to the part of your story that hurt. Her throat tightened. He reached into his jacket and removed a slim folder. This is not a gift, he said. It is a proposal. The Ryu Cultural Foundation can fund the Seraphine grant for 5 years. But you will lead it. You will choose the board. You will control the archive partnership. My name opens doors. Yours decides what walks through them. Ife accepted the folder. This time, her hands did not shake. You trust me with that? I trust the woman who covered my sister with a priceless shawl and told a room full of wealthy people to be embarrassed. She laughed then. A real laugh. Soft, surprised, alive. From inside the house, music started again, slower now, less arrogant. Song Hwan offered his arm. Not assuming, asking. Ife looked at it, then at him. Not rescuer and rescued, she said.
No.
Partners? His eyes warmed. If you allow it. Ife took his arm. Together, they returned to the reunion. Not as spectacle this time, as decision. Eulalie Viral made her announcement before dinner. She stood at the center of the tent with both hands resting on her cane, her face pale but resolved. Callista sat stiffly nearby, a woman watching her kingdom sold for truth. I owe a debt, Eulalie began, to a woman who is no longer alive to hear me pay it. The tent quieted. Ife stood near the side with Song Hwan beside her and her mother's archive box held against her chest. Seraphine Nwosu was my granddaughter. She was also one of the finest textile restoration minds this family ever produced. Her labor preserved much of what this estate has claimed as legacy. Eulalie's voice trembled once, then strengthened. We failed her. I failed her. I allowed pride, prejudice, and cowardice to separate this family from a woman whose only crime was loving someone we did not choose for her. Callista's eyes shone with fury. Eulalie did not look at her. Today, the Textile Archive wing of Halcyon Ridge will be renamed the Seraphine Nwosu Archive. Her authorship will be restored in every record we control. Her portfolio and letters will be released to her daughter, Ifioma, who will determine how they are preserved and shared. A murmur moved through the guests. Then applause. This time, it did not begin from pity or scandal. It began from recognition. Ife did not clap. She could not. She stood still, holding the box, feeling something inside her loosen that had been tied since childhood. Not healed. Loosened. That was enough. After the announcement, Callista tried to leave quietly through the side path. But the crowd no longer parted for her with instinctive respect. People continued talking. A cousin stepped accidentally into her way and did not apologize quickly enough. Bellamy was already on the phone with someone, whispering that she needed distance from the viral situation. Power did not always fall with a crash. Sometimes it evaporated while music played. Aoife went inside one last time before leaving. In the textile room, she opened the archive box again and removed a shawl folded beneath tissue paper. Deep blue silk, hand-mended in silver thread. Her mother's work. Her mother's patience. Her mother's proof. She pressed it to her cheek. For years, she had thought returning to Halcyon Ridge would make her feel small again. Instead, the house felt smaller than memory. On her way out, a young girl stopped her near the veranda steps. Maybe 12 years old, with nervous eyes and a ribbon slipping from her hair. "I'm Leora," the girl said. "I don't know if we're cousins exactly. In this family, nobody knows until inheritance is involved," Aoife said gently. Leora smiled shyly. "I want to learn textile restoration. I never knew someone could do that as a real job." Aoife looked at the girl and saw a chance to end one small inheritance of cruelty.
"It is a real job," she said.
"A patient one. A beautiful one. Could I maybe write to you about it?" Aoife reached into her clutch, took out a small card, and handed it to her.
"Yes.
But only if you promise to love the work more than the applause." Leora nodded seriously. "I promise." Outside, the black cars waited in the golden remains of the afternoon. The same family members who had expected Aoife to arrive ashamed now watched her leave with her mother's archive, Songhuan's respect, Eulalie's public apology, and a new foundation bearing Seraphine's name. At the lead car, Songhuan offered his arm again. This time, Aoife paused. The first time she took it, she had walked into battle. This time, she was leaving with victory. But victory was not the right word. Restoration was better. She placed her hand on his arm. Not because she needed help walking, because she chose who deserved to stand beside her. Inside the car, she held the archive box against her chest as Halcyon Ridge began to recede through the window. The estate looked beautiful from a distance. Most things built on pride did. Songhuan sat beside her, silent until the gates closed behind them. Then he asked, "Do you regret coming?" Aoife looked down at the brass corner of the archive box, then at the blue shawl folded across her lap. She thought of the cream invitation, Callista's voicemail, the side table near the service path, the slideshow meant to shame her, her mother's name spoken aloud beneath the tent, the young girl asking to learn. Then she looked back at the fading estate. "No," she said. "For the first time, I did not leave that place smaller than I entered." Songhuan's expression softened. Outside, the mountains turned gold. Aoife leaned back against the seat and closed her eyes. She was not the poor girl invited to be mocked. She was not the family's cautionary tale. She was Seraphine Nwosu's daughter, the woman who walked into humiliation and left carrying legacy. And behind her, Halcyon Ridge grew smaller and smaller until it became exactly what it had always been. A beautiful house. Not home,